Global supply chains are increasingly susceptible to disruptions caused by geopolitical issues like trade wars, sanctions, and regulatory shifts. The discussion will focus on strategies businesses can adopt to ensure resilience, such as leveraging multimodal transport solutions and adapting to new trade routes. First, I would like to call on stage our moderator for this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Mr. Samir J Shah, Chief Mentor and Director, JBS Academy. A visionary leader and a mentor to many, he contributes significantly to India's global trade ecosystem. He's a pioneer in skill development for the logistics and international trade sectors. With decades of experience, he has been instrumental in shaping the future of the logistics industry through education and training. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mr. Samir J Shah. Welcome, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, moving on, now I would like to call on stage Mr. Ramesh Mamidala, Head Cargo, Air India. With over 30 years in the logistics industry, his expertise spans global functions, including significant roles at Emirates Group and Qatar Airways. Now, as the driving force behind Air India Cargo, he continues to shape the industry with his wealth of experience and innovative approach. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mr. Ramesh Mamidala. Now I would like to invite on stage Dr. Sanjeevv Khanna, Chief Operating Officer, Patanjali. With a wealth of experience in leadership and operational excellence, Dr. Khanna plays a pivotal role in driving Patanjali's growth and operational efficiencies across diverse verticals. Welcome, Mr. Khanna. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call on stage Mr. Sreenivas Rao Nandigam, Global Head, Supply Chain, Sun Pharma. He's the powerhouse behind some pharmaceutical industries. Global supply chain. He orchestrates procurement, demand planning, supply strategy, and more, bringing over 2 decades of expertise from Unilever and Reckitt Benckiser. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Mr. Sreenivas Rao. Next, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Umang S Bhatnagar, Senior Vice President, Strategic Sourcing, Supply Chain and IT, SRF Limited. With extensive expertise across supply chain management, strategic sourcing, and technology integration, Mr. Bhatnagar has been instrumental in driving operational excellence at SRF, a global leader in chemical and industrial intermediates. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Mr. Bhatnagar. Now I would like to invite on stage Mr. Sam Katgara, partner, Jeena Company, a professional with illustrious legacy and as one of the leading pillars of this 124 years old esteemed organization. Mr. Katgara has been instrumental in steering its growth and sustaining its legacy of excellence in global logistics. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Mr. Sam Katgara. Over to you, sir, our absolutely wonderful moderator, and have a wonderful panel discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this session. A special thank you to the organizers for having all of us over here for the opening session. Ayushi was very careful that you all are opening batsmen for my 3-day test. So please see that the opening innings goes well, So that's going to be the effort that we try and do a light but interesting, and the topic is a bit heavy, so we'll try and keep it like that. We'd also appreciate questions during the session. We don't want a separate Q&A. If at any point in time, once one of my panelists finishes, and if somebody wants to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll be very happy to take your question right then and there at that time. Now, we're supposed to be debating on something which is made our lives miserable, navigating geopolitical risks to strengthen global supply chains. But sometimes I wonder, when one uses the word globalization, localization, just in time, just in case, just in need, I don't think any of them, Atmanirbharta, I don't think any of them were coined by a logistician. It was some professor sitting in some university in some corner of the world who said this is how it should be. And then we as logisticians have to bear the brunt of the whole thing. Somebody is manufacturing, somebody is consuming, and we have to keep on reducing our costs every year to just ensure that his supply chains are met with. I think we need to recognize our role over here. We are an important player over here, but all of this is somewhere forced on us. It is not something that we can really do much about. We need to appreciate that. And more than us, I think it's also the industry who needs to appreciate that. I am thankful to Mohit and Ayushi for balancing this panel. After I get an opportunity to address a lot of events, but this is one panel where we have the users and the logisticians together. I would have appreciated a user in the opening panel also. That would be a bit more this thing. And for all the wonderful ladies over here, my apologies that we haven't been able to be gender diverse and have a beautiful lady over here in our panel. So maybe, Ayushi, that's something for you for next year, that we need to be balanced out over there. What's also interesting, which we must understand, which even India has done, we are keeping on reading about the US government saying that they want to take action against Gautam Adani and Sagar Adani or his nephew on corruption and things like that. And then one wonders when one reads the papers that how does it affect me? I'm sitting in India, he's sitting in America, and he's suddenly talking about all of these things. But we need to recognize that India also did that. India did that in the year 2018 when the government very quietly amended the Customs Act and said that anybody, anywhere in the world, in any geography, violating the Customs Act will be held responsible in India. Now, this is a new type of geopolitical pressure that comes in. Most of the times we don't even realize it, that some country is going to pass a legislation of this nature and how it can affect all of us. We've also seen the effect of the US banks on the Indian logistic companies and the Indian exporters and importers. Whenever they want to deal with a country, they have sanctioned. I have nothing to do with that country. I have no problems with that country. I'm trading with that company. I'm looking after my country. He's looking after his country. And some third country suddenly decides that because I don't like him, I'm going to sanction him. And because I have sanctioned him, I'm going to take action on you for dealing with him. I think that really complicates the whole thing. So I have a very eminent panel, three users and two logisticians. And I think I'll start with one thing which hurts all of us, and that is trade barriers. I'd like to go to Mr. Bhatnagar. Mr. Bhatnagar, we all understand that trade barriers like tariffs, non-tariffs, sanctions can significantly impact your supply chain, your manufacturing, your costs and everything. How has a company like SRF been able to manage that, and what are the things you all are doing over there? A mic? Ayushi mic?
I think so. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the question, sir. Good morning, or I should say good afternoon. Let me just take a few minutes to talk about this. First, we differentiate between tariff and non-tariff barriers, obviously. The thing with tariff barriers is that they tend to equalize over time, by which I mean to say even geographies which don't have tariff barriers would tend to raise their prices given that opportunity is there. So if I have an Indian supplier and I have say a European or a Chinese or any other, say let's say keeping it simple, there's a Chinese supplier and we have anti-dumping duty, just to take an example of what may happen. So when the price goes up, there's a tariff barrier of some sort which is happening. Uh, Either China is not exporting to India, US is saying that when you import from China, you will have duty happening on that. So if there's an Indian guy, okay, let me do this. Indian guy supplying to US, Chinese guy supplying to US. US says there is a tariff barrier on the Chinese source. The Indian guy will raise his price. So for the US, the domestic economy gets more expensive. But otherwise, there is no net impact in terms of competitiveness for the Indian supplier of this. Of course, the Indian guy is in a position to reduce his price and to take more of the share if he wants to do that. So that is the opportunity which it emerges. As far as a user, how does it affect me and what do I do? First thing, we do 2 or 3 things. First is that we try to have sources across regions. So if I have a Chinese source, which would be very easy to do in a chemical company, I would go and meet Indian partners and I would encourage them to start production in India. Not just to kind of reduce risk, but also to kind of encourage the Indian ecosystem. It is something which we do as a general practice because chemical industry grows as a set. There is a network effect which is very powerful. So if SRF wants to grow, we would need to have strong partners with us in the local ecosystem, and we try to build that. So if I've got a domestic source, I've got a Chinese source, I've got a European source, I may have an American source, I may have a Far Eastern source. So if we have 4 or 5 different regions by which we are de-risking ourselves and we are actively promoting a domestic source, then that kind of reduces the risk of getting into trouble. And this is not just about SRF. There is a standard technology where people try to produce close to the end customer. Because of course that's the kind of risk which happens when you've got a tariff or a non-tariff barrier, any sort of barrier. The market is the one which is being protected. So if you're producing in that market or very close to that market, you kind of reduce that risk of getting into trouble. So I think that's what we would practically be doing, sir, in terms of addressing these risks.
Sir, I was studying a very classic case of a non-tariff barrier where Europe said that if you want to import food items from India, I want to test the pesticide content in the chili powder used. Now, all of us understand that chili powder in a 40-foot container would be less than 100 kilos. Has your industry faced any such non-tariff barrier?
Sir, from an export point of view, we have not hit that. I mean, you could consider REACH, for example, which is a very well-known situation, as a non-tariff barrier. And that's, I think, which we're all experiencing. Until you are a contributor, until you provide that data, you cannot do this. A chemical which I use, which is exported to Europe, has to be REACH certified, else I can't sell it. So the same material in my supply chain has 2 different codes, one which is REACH certified and one which is not REACH certified. And when I'm producing something, I need to make sure I'm using the REACH certified one. I need to have a supply chain, the paper trail, which shows that this is chemical was originally produced in from either a European source or from a REACH certified source. And that whole paper system trail is in place for me to be able to export that. So that's the kind of thing which I think you're talking about. And I believe that most of the W2M members are today actively taking up NTBs. And I think India has also started doing something in this, although we're, I would say, very early steps here.
Sir, as far as India is concerned, from about 5 allied acts to 86 participating government agencies, and that number increasing and hopefully going to reach 120, I think every possible commodity coming into the country is going to have a non-tariff barrier. And that's going to be India's answer to the world. And for all the logisticians here, I think it's a great career to be able to work only on the sanctions and the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers. All of this with the proposed growth of the country, and we heard Mr. Wagh in the morning. We also heard Turkish Airlines' ambitious plans of reaching number 1 from number 3. That takes me to Mr. Mamidala. What are the things India is going to do, sir, to navigate through all these geopolitical instabilities and become a logistic hub? Because we will have to keep in pace with everyone. A mic, please. Yeah, it started.
All right. So thank you for asking this question. So before I begin, good afternoon, all of you. I first and foremost, I need to congratulate Mohit's team upstream for organizing it. As I was sharing with Mr. Sreenivas before the session began, I've been attending this since they started organizing this convention. And I have, over the last few years, I've seen this doubling every single year. Although Mohit is not yet, but on a lighter note, looks like Mohit, in a few years down the line, he has to build his own convention because he may not have the space here to accommodate the size, because he's more than doubling every single year. And I've also been very fortunate, since he started this convention, that I've been participating in some form or the other. So either I've been supporting or I've been actively participating in it. And what I see today is wonderful. Such a large event, as Mr. Oza said, in the last session. This is an international cargo show in India. I think that's an apt title for this kind of a show. I'm very, very happy to see such a world-class event happening in Mumbai, for all of us. Everything is really world standard. So thank you, Mohit and team. I think it is very, very well organized. Back to this question that is being asked here. On the geopolitical risk, when I started researching for this topic a few weeks ago, I came across something very, very interesting. I came across an index which BlackRock, an investment institute, they have kind of started establishing and measuring since 2018. And this is the impact of every risk that happens globally on the global trade. And that's kind of measured on a scale of plus 1.5 to minus 1.5. And they have measured every risk since 2018, everything that we've heard of, the steel barriers, US pulling out of the Iran trade deal, the recent Israel-Palestine conflict that we have seen, and Russia invasion of Ukraine, so on and so forth. And then what I've noticed is currently, for example, the index is running at plus 0.5, right? When the invasion happened 2 years ago, that index actually spiked to plus 1.2. It actually spiked very, very seriously, and then it actually came down. And when the Israel-Palestine conflict happened, it again spiked to that level of 0.75, and then it actually started normalizing. So one thing I have noticed is when such risks happen, big or small, doesn't matter. So there is a serious spike because the world is not prepared to absorb the impact of those changes globally. And then over a period of time, it kind of normalizes, not to the level that it was before, but then people kind of find out how to manage it, how to continue with the trade, how to manage the supply chains, how to manage the cost. So it kind of normalizes it. But it is still above the normal level today. As I said, it is running at more plus 0.5 with the conflicts running in the background, not really no sight of these things going back to that level. Having said it, then I kind of looked at these kind of trend where things spike up and then they kind of normalize over a quarter or so, and the application of that to the airline industry. What we have noticed in case of the airline industry, not just me as Air India, but other airlines as well, when such things happen, we are kind of faced with immediate challenges. Your routes change, right? So, and sometimes it is in your favor. Like, for example, what is happening in Russia-Ukraine war, to some extent, it is actually in our favor because we're allowed to take those routes. And a lot of other airlines, the European ones and the North American ones are not able to take those routes. So they take very longer routes. So there's a more fuel burn, less payload, more cost, so on and so forth. But we have a bit of advantage. But airline industry in general, they get impacted with that. And sometimes you're actually not able to fly. Right? Israel is an example where we had flights 4 times a week, and then we're not able to operate those flights anymore. They're very, very attractive route. Good yield, both for cargo as well as passenger. So you're immediately, when such a risk happens, when such a conflict happens, you are hit with the immediate impact. Route changing, cost going up, insurance premiums going up, handling costs going up, and sometimes you actually are shutting down the stations, so on and so forth. And then it takes a bit of a time for the airlines and the trade to understand what are the alternatives. Then we see different forms of multimodal methods coming up. For example, in the last 2-3 quarters, I have seen some of the trade partners using places like Dubai and other ports in the Middle East as well. Very interestingly, air to sea, right? You take to that hub by air, then actually you're distributing by sea, which is very, very interesting to me. It was never popular before. We have heard of sea to air, but then we have actually not seen air to sea becoming very popular. But then it is very popular now because people are using major hubs and use the sea route in the region for local distribution, or obviously the surface one when it comes to India. But what we have also seen is some of very non-traditional small hubs come up. Amman is an example. So I've heard over the last 1 year, a lot of land transportation, surface transportation in terms of distribution happens from Amman to a lot of conflict impacted areas. So we see stuff going up to Amman by air or by surface from other parts of the globe. and then they get distributed. So these hubs, whenever they are in the past, just about a year ago, nobody thought Amman would be a big hub. No, Amman is a big hub. They're building SEZs. They're expanding massively the airport capacity, so on and forth. The airline, the Royal Jordanian, is also expanding massively. So there are obviously some positive changes, but from the airline point of view, we see new hubs coming up, new methods of multimodal transportation happening. And then people also come with ideas of technology to absorb the cost. Not completely, but they find out ways of optimizing the cost. So I think what I have kind of observed is when such a conflict happens, people need some time, depending on the size of the conflict, depending on the impact it has geographically. I think in a quarter, 2 quarters, people kind of understand. They find out methods of managing it. They find out methods of optimizing cost, and then so that the global supply chains are kind of normalized. So I think this is very interesting. Obviously, people would like to go back to the previous ways of managing it. It will happen, I'm sure, maybe a year, 6 months down the line. But meanwhile, this is the impact that I've seen.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot, even giving us a great opportunity to grow. And just for the interest of the audience, we have a city called Tirunelveli in Tamil Nadu. If any of you has an opportunity to study that, it has nothing, no industry, no schools, no colleges, nothing, but it's a huge logistic hub for distribution right over there. So exactly what we keep reading about the international hubs, but we have a few examples like this in India also. We talked about tariff barriers, we talked about non-tariff barriers, we talked about sanctions. There's another word which worries me, and that becomes compliances. And who more than the pharma industry to go and check on the regulatory compliances that are coming up, and with such a disrupted supply chain and with such a lot of upheaval having all the way, how is your industry managing regulatory compliances?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and geopolitical changes have been happening, and the risks were there, but it has got accentuated, let's say, in the last 4.5 to 5 years after COVID, I would say. And as you rightly put across, pharmaceutical is actually a very complex supply chain, not a very heavy supply chain. What I mean by heavy is the value density is very high, but the volumes are not very large, unlike, let's say, in a consumer goods or in a chemicals industry. And the regulation talks about starting from, let's say, if I am an exporter wanting to export to United States, it starts from my key starting material to intermediate stages to API to actually formulation, and everything is actually written on the drug master file, which we have to submit to the US FDA and make sure that everything is actually manufactured then and there. Yeah. So how are we managing it? Not just as Sun Pharma, but as industry, we have been grappling with it. It's a little bit of push from the Prime Minister's office to be able to. So also, let me give you a little bit of a context that pharma industry is very big for the country. It's about $60 billion. Out of that, $30 billion is exported and $30 billion is India. But having said that, this particular exports business is far, far, far more complex than what the domestic business is. And over a period of time, actually, the margins have been depleting. So we have to find local solutions. Erstwhile, we used to import a lot of APIs from China. And in fact, I can talk of average of the industry, we used to be like 68 to 70% imports. And now we have actually come down to only about 40% imports from the 68 to 70. So that is one way of actually dealing with, the political risks and managing regulatory in-house. Because we are highly regulated, as you rightly said, one of the strategies which we use is to actually have control on things by yourself. So instead of using a lot of contract manufacturers, we actually tend to kind of insource a lot of stuff, unlike in, let's say, many other industries. So that's one strategy which we use. The other strategy is we also have, of course, the regular things of going for audits and so on and so forth. And same thing applies for even the logistics service providers. What the industry is looking for going forward is long-term, sustainable actually way of doing things rather than short-term and doing it for here and now and this quarter. So these are the two things which I would say from a regulatory compliance perspective we do. One is actually have control on yourself, and the other is actually have, even if you have to have contracts with the suppliers and logistics service providers, go more long term than actually short term.
That's a wonderful takeaway, Mr. Rao. Have control with yourself. So that brings me to Mr. Katgara. What should the Indian businesses do, so that they have control on themselves, they can work through the trade routes and position themselves as being capable of maintaining the global supply chains?
There is, see, the kind of disruptions that are taking place, there is no one solution that can be offered or one sort of route that can be offered. There could be political disruptions, as we are seeing war in so many places. There could be natural calamities, floods, earthquakes. There could be self-inflicted disruptions, such as if we saw Brexit, what happened. It could be strikes locally. So there are many different sort of disruptions which take place to give one sort of solution. But as you mentioned, for Indian business houses today, we should not undermine what Indian mind is. Today we are extremely versatile. If you see really historically going back to our independence, nowhere in the history of the world a country has achieved independence without a revolution or without war. To get independence, India managed with non-violence. Of course, there was big sacrifices being made, but end of the day, it got its independence without any violence. Look at the recent situation of COVID. Who in 2018 or 2019 early days would expect that the world would come to a standstill? Nobody would be able to go to the office. People would be bound in their homes. India, 1.4 billion people, managed one of the best, I would say, in the world, not only from the government point of view, but even going down to the villages, the kind of responsibility the villagers took to control COVID. Here in our slums, people staying 10 people in a room, controlled by the state governments, did an exceptional job. So the Indian mind is really versatile. So coming to solutions in disruptions, I would say people in the audience would be able to give more solutions than I can give. But coming to really anything from my side, today I would say flexibility would be really a key factor in handling any disruption. Being digitally, having digital solutions and being digitally qualified from the trade perspective should be another important factor to have less and less human involvement to get things done, to get goods moving. And also I would see as a trade, India should look far more at being a transshipment hub like its neighbors. That way we can get goods out or goods in, much more in much more different ways. So these are the few things I could really suggest as Indian businessmen we could look at developing.
Thank you. I think when you referred to the pandemic, we were all caught by surprise. We have somewhere, we tend to become complacent and forget the risks that are attached. Like I come in from Ahmedabad and we had a massive earthquake around 23, 24 years back. And we found out that most of the residents of Gujarat did not have an insurance cover for the earthquake. And when I had a dialogue with one of the seniors at the insurance company, he said 1956 Gujarat had a worse earthquake. And after that, for the next 15 years, everyone covered earthquake as a risk. But in 40, 50 years, you have 3 generations of people changing. And when a new person comes in, he always forgets that there can be risks and we are only pressurizing people on costs. So I think risk management in every aspect has to be a minimum that organizations, companies, countries, individuals will have to continuously remember and work on it. That brings me to Dr. Khanna. For you, with all these risks, and you all are a big manufacturing entity also. So how are you going to manage your raw material availability? with all these geopolitical risks? And also, how are you going to manage? Because you're a consumer driven industry, a small chain somewhere, and if I go to a shelf and I don't find your product, my loyalty is going to go down. So, how are you proposing to manage it, or what are you all doing just now?
Thanks for your question, Samir. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to Mohit and Ayushi for having us here for this event. And it's wonderfully organized. I must acknowledge that before I answer the question. So, as far as this question is concerned, if I talk it in reference to my current assignment, that is with Patanjali, where I'm working for last 10 years. Here, if you see, I think most of the people already know that in our case, we have done most of the backward integration. So most of our products are herb-based, and herbs that we get from Himalayas, from the natural sources. And it's about 5 years back that we acquired Ruchi Soya Industries in the edible oil space. And there, our dependency is almost 70% or plus on the international markets. So here, the concern of geopolitical comes much more than it was ever earlier for us in Patanjali. What we do basically is that if even in edible oil business, our sourcing is becoming more and more domestic now. We are shifting India. So what we are doing that most of our products right now are indigenously sourced, produced, and in terms of the plantation, etc., we are independent. And hectares of land for palm plantation is there in Andhra and Telangana, in Northeast. So that way we are becoming more and more self-sufficient and self-independent. Another thing is that we already have, by structure, by design, we have our plants spread across the country. So we have it in north, south, east, west, all the regions. And all products, like whether you talk of biscuits, you talk of nutraceutical products, you talk of edible oil, for everything we have widespread plants available. Those plants cater to the regional markets primarily. And in case we have any challenge in a particular region, for example, recently, last year, we had those farmers protesting at the border of North, just beyond Delhi, NCR. So we were able to get those products supplied from other plants. So while our logistic cost goes up, but at the end of it, as you rightly said, we are not short of our product on the shelf. And that is why we have been having the kind of growth that we had been having over the last 10 years. Thank you.
Dr. Khanna, my apologies, and my apologies to everyone for asking you a political question. We're talking about geopolitical instability for global supply chains. Do you actually foresee a geopolitical instability in the domestic supply chain within the country? Given the way the whole politics is moving in the country, do you envisage something like that, or do you all have not thought about it? And if you all have thought about it, what have you thought about?
No, certainly we can't survive and grow in the market unless we very seriously keep thinking about it. Because for us, most of the challenges of geopolitical reasons also come from within India.
Within India,
not globally, but within India we keep facing it. And there are certain markets which are more stronger for us. And accordingly, in terms of our sourcing, in terms of our vendor base, in terms of our market base, it's all planned and designed accordingly, and we keep tweaking it very frequently. So what happens almost every 5 years, as a plan, we keep re-evaluating our distribution network as well as our sourcing network. And depending where the market is moving, as per our understanding and the forecast available, because fortunately now with the AI tools, etc., predictive and prescriptive data analytics are available. So we are able to see in which market, what trend is happening, what products are moving in what market, and what size, what pack size. And accordingly, what we do that we have 2 or 3 plants manufacturing that. And those 2, 3 plants will not be in one region. It will be in different regions. So basically the intent is that only that we should always be having a fallback plan also when we go for production or we go for marketing, both sides, the inward as well as the outward part.
Interesting.
Samir, I have a very tangential take on your question about geopolitics. How does it impact supply chains, etc., etc. Human beings individually, they want to excel. They will go all over the globe. Societies as collective people would want a lot of protectionism. Okay, be it now today Trump talking of actually putting in those anti-immigration policies and things like that. So similarly for goods manufacturing, the trade barriers and the non-trade barriers, all these things are about actually trying to actually protect their own communities, which will continue to happen throughout the world. And in my opinion, as much of globalization is going to happen, it will actually go to an inflection point where protectionism will start actually happening even more. For example, Brexit happened in the last 5 years, and that's all about, they wanted to protect their own turf with respect to Europe. It's a different story what the outcome is, but it's about actually, UK wanting to protect their own turf. And that's why Brexit happened after actually having combined with the EU. So in my opinion, it's actually going to be an inflection point and then things coming down.
Very interesting. Yes, sir, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing which is very pertinent to the second part of your question that you asked, that how do we see it within the domestic environment only. It is something for everyone to know that during the COVID period of about 2.5 years or so, not even for a day our production is stopped, not even a day our deliveries is stopped. All across the country, all across the plants, all operations, right from the raw material sourcing. Of course, one part was that we are part of that essential goods or essential commodity industry. So because of that, obviously, there had been the government support for that. But having said that, getting labor during those periods, ensuring the right availability of the products at the all plants locations, and most importantly, getting the transportation at that point of time. So all the three parts, right from sourcing the raw material, getting the workforce in the plants, and we did many things, which were the softer aspects, like taking care of the employees and ensuring them for a better amount, medical insurance, etc., giving them a lot of incentives. Because at the end of the day, they were like warriors for us. They were fighting it out there. Because if they stop that, it would create, if they stop the work, then it will create another problem for the people across the country. Because these are the essential goods. If these are not available, the edible product itself becomes a big challenge.
Something I can't resist out of whatever Mr. Rao and Dr. Khanna said, we must also recognize that in the next few years, India has to become the biggest exporter of manpower. The Indian youth will have to leave the country and go and settle down in other geographies. We aren't going to have so many jobs. We aren't going to have so much to sustain our population. And that is going to bring in some new challenges for all of us at that point in time, which stems from the word protectionism, which Mr. Rao used. Before I continue, is there anyone from the audience who would like to make an observation, ask a question or something? Yeah, we've got somebody here. Yeah. Sir, could you introduce yourself and then ask the question? Or the observation, and to whom you are asking the question?
Good afternoon.
It's on, it's on.
Good afternoon, all the panelists on the dais. My name is Mahendra Pokhriyal. I represent the International Air Cargo Association, which is the global platform for all the air cargo stakeholders. Thank you very much for giving the insight on the topic. But my question is that, what are the key indicators that one should monitor to identify the potential geopolitical risks affecting the supply chain? And maybe Mr. Sam Katgara can throw some light on this, because Jeena being one of the oldest logistic company in the country, and I'm sure that Mr. Katgara must have seen many disruptions in his life. So what will be his suggestion for the youngster, that how one should identify those indicator, which a potential indicator showing the geopolitical risk and affecting the supply chain? Thank you.
I guess have a good astrologer. It's very difficult to identify potential threats. Okay. Today, if we could identify potential threats, the step would be we could avoid those potential threats. So, to answer you is, besides what we hear from the news, besides what we hear from our overseas partners, keeping in touch with the trade, with the airlines, with the port authorities, with the customers, you tend to get an idea of what is really going on in the world. So you cannot really pinpoint that there will be a problem, but you get an idea that, okay, like the pirate situation. Nobody would expect today pirates, except what we read as children, that they used to be bad people. But today they are really affecting the supply chain. Nobody would expect that. So you see, this kind of situation arises and you have to be prepared. But to say that it would be happening in this country at this time, you really would need an astrologer.
Can I will expand, Mr. Pokhriyal. I think as part of my response to the earlier question, I talked about one of the indexes I came across. This is from BlackRock Investment Institute index, which is the Geopolitical Risk Index. So there are many research houses globally that have established this tradition of identifying and measuring these risks. So this one, which I've been following since September last year, they also publish a report once in a quarter, once in 2 quarters. For example, if you look at the report that was done in the month of September, they have looked at top 10 risks that have happened or expected to happen. It's not really predicting the risk to happen, but for example, US presidential election, depending on who would win, would be a risk by itself, right? People start polarizing. We kind of knew if Trump would come to power, what policy changes would happen, what tariff barriers would come in. So this index and the research behind it has kind of looked at these risks materializing and what would be the impact of these risks materializing on the trade. You look at the report. I think the report is about 2-3 pages. It is not a very large report. Google, you can find it. This is what I was reading a few months ago. So as I said, so there are many such indexes, but this is one index that I've been looking at consistently over the last few weeks. So they measure every risk. In fact, collective impact of all the risks on the trade, global trade, on a scale of plus 1.5 to minus 1.5. So nothing has actually gone beyond plus 1.2. That was the maximum when the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened 2 years ago. So I think there are methods available globally now. I think we should look at the research. We should look at their measurement on the impact on the trade. That should actually tell us, how we should plan our own businesses, both at the national level, also at every business level.
Yeah, Mr. Bhatnagar, just add one thought to this, that getting to know that something is about to go wrong will also only get you so far. That's not really what you want to do. What you want to do is manage the outcome, right? So if you want to think about that, even if somebody was to tell you in advance that 1 week from now, there will be missiles in the Red Sea and ships from there will no longer be able to pass and they will have to go around Africa and add 1 month to your lead time. Supposing somebody tells you this, then what are your alternatives available to you? Now, if you start thinking in terms of what are the alternatives available to me to manage missiles in the Red Sea, that's a very, very specific outcome to predict. And for that, of course, you need that astrologer. But if the question is, can I solve a problem of delay by 1 month in delivery? Then this is a more generic problem. And if you address this problem in advance, that if you're thinking about solving a problem of 1 week delay or 2 weeks delay or 4 weeks delay, now it turns into a financial problem. Or you can look at a long-term solution. A short-term solution is maybe inventory. A long-term solution is developing a domestic source. And there's a cost to it and there's a solution to it. So there's a risk and there's a cost, right? And depending on your value at risk, whether you want to solve it that, no, I must give the product itself, or whether I can do an insurance for that and solve it financially. So there, when you look at it like this, then you may find answers which you can't if you want to be able to predict specifically missiles in the Red Sea.
I think I'd like to just share one thing more, Mr. Pokhriyal, is just as ESG and everything as compliance has reached the board, that it has become a topic for the board. I think in a short while, risk management will also become a very important aspect for every organization, whether domestic, international services or manufacturing. Risk management is going to be a very important factor, and we all need to anticipate the risks. We can't be forgetting that the risk is just around the corner. Would anyone else like to comment on something?
Samir Bhai, before anybody would ask, I need to add, you actually are bang on and on the point. As we said in the beginning, unfortunately, most of the geopolitical risks that happen globally, they impact the aviation industry a lot. All of us have seen it over the last 2-3 years. So in most of the top airlines, the large airlines, we have a tradition of trying to foresee what would happen in the next year. So as part of the budgeting process itself, so you kind of develop a risk matrix. You look at what risk can happen, and if such a risk happens, what is the mitigation strategy to reduce costs, to not to disrupt operations, so on and so forth. So there is a practice of that nature. But then again, sometimes you get it wrong, right? The Israel-Iran conflict that happened quarter ago opened up actually new windows for us, Mr. Pokhriyal. For example, nobody was using Afghanistan airspace, right? So when that happened, when we were not able to use that, for our flights towards West, we said, can we start using it? And then we received approval from DGC and we started using it. So that actually made the flights shorter, saved cost, and very efficient. So sometimes, although I should not be saying it, but sometimes you also see some positive outcomes from such conflicts happening because you start thinking differently, which is what he said. So fortunately, a lot of large companies have this tradition of looking at the risks that would happen in the next financial year and see how you need to react to them.
I'm sorry for that small interruption. Yeah, so that's exactly what is going to happen to all of us. Would somebody else like to ask a question or make an observation? Yeah, Fletcher. Can we have the mic here, please?
Hi, good afternoon. So, in continuation to the discussions and the comments,
could you introduce yourself, please?
sorry. So, my name is Fletcher. I represent Bangalore Airport, the cargo business. So, in continuation to the questions and the observations and the discussion that we are all having, so my question is primarily to all the speakers, to all the manufacturers and the shippers here. So, one of the primary questions is that, from your perspective, what are the government initiatives that you see which are crucial for preparing India's economy and the supply chain in the geopolitical situations? Alternatively to that is also what I would like to understand is what do you feel are the collaborative efforts that an industry is missing today among the industry, the manufacturers, governments, as well as the logistics service providers? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. There are two parts of it. So first part, as far as what the government initiatives probably can be taken, I think two very important parts are one that the Skill India, as it's being discussed and it's being promoted very hugely. I still believe that the old saying that for peanuts you get monkeys. So you need to have quality people, qualified people. And for that, it is very important. At the end of the day, what happens, as he rightly said, Sam, that we are not astrologers, but a good, efficient manager is who proactively can take corrective measures to avoid any problem that is coming forth. Now, for that, it is very important that you have the quality and the right people. Today, what is happening is still after almost, I would say, I have spent almost 37 years in supply chain in the country, working with best of the multinationals and the Indian corporates. Still what happens that for logistic and supply chain, very recently, it is just in last decade that people have started getting groomed for that role. Otherwise, whoever was not fitting in sales, marketing or finance and account, they used to be dumped in logistics. It was practically a blue collar job, irrespective of the level you were. So basically, that is very important that we value this function and we train people for that. If they are qualified, trained people, quality people, then they will be able to foresee the challenges that are coming and take the proactive actions. That's point number one, where I believe that the skill development is something extremely critical, which is still not focused as much as it should be. And the second part was how do we
So the industry's perspective or the manufacturer or shipper's perspective towards the collaborative efforts that is required among all the industry stakeholders to ensure this industry remain resilient during such situations of geopolitical tensions.
So when we talk of the collaboration, I tell you, my experience is that till date, this divide of service provider and service user still exists. Unless we bring that trust and transparency in the relationship, the collaboration will not be as strong as it should be, particularly in the situations of crisis. It's very important that they understand our problem, we understand their problem. So the vendors, the customers, and the manufacturers, they all need to have a very clear, transparent, and trustworthy relationship. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. Wherever the trust is there, for example, I can give example of Patanjali, that if the trust is there, people are willing to wait, and they are there to support for anything and everything, particularly from the vendors I'm talking, that they trust the brand. So they also trust that whenever, wherever any issue is coming, if we have any challenge, they are there to support us, because they know when they have a challenge, we are there to support them. So that kind of collaborative effort, if everyone follows, I see no reason why it should not work very effectively. Thank you. I hope.
Chair, my take on that, we're running out of time, so I'll very quickly mention 2 points. I think the 2 benefits I would like to see from the stakeholder integrated approach. One is the demand forecasting. All of us working in the airport, including airline capacity, for example, I would like to know what would happen 6 months later, which commodity, what sectors, what kind of volumes, right? So that I will be able to plan both at the airport level as well as my airline capacity to ensure that I meet the demand, so that I don't have any such pricing, I don't have any capacity problems at the airport, I have enough manpower, so on and so forth. No, that is yet to be established. Obviously, it is a global problem. It is not India-related problem. I see this everywhere. I think when all the stakeholders work together across the supply chain, we will be in a better capacity to manage the demand forecasting, because we have a lot of data. This is one. Second, going back to what he talked about, is the integration. Fortunately, integration of all the stakeholders on one platform. Today, regardless of how much ever EDA that we established, you still talk to one guy. We don't know whether that guy is talking to the end consumer or not on both ends. So, in fact, I remember, including even today, e-commerce industry, both international as well as domestic, when their shipments come to the airport, for them, the airport is a black hole, because they can't talk to the airport. They need somebody else to talk to them. So, majority of the e-commerce companies, they have that problem today. That is because there is no one technology platform using the same template, using the same format to talk to each other. I think these will benefit. These will actually bring in a lot of benefit to the industry. Now that Mohit is here, Mohit, so you're not here. So I said that the rate at which you're growing, you need to build your own convention center next year.
I have been in supply chain for the last 3.5 decades. And even in schools and colleges, people talk of actually, and I'll give you just one cliched thing that, supply chainers are actually taught just in time. Now they are also being taught what is called as just in case something happens. How do I actually manage that particular risk? And this is actually a formal subject in supply chain schools about risk management. This is a question which actually the previous one and the current one. So we should start thinking not just in time, but also just in case, to be able to be prepared for any eventualities that happen.
Dr. Khanna, you make me a very happy man, because I hope when you as industry recognize that I pay peanuts, I get monkeys, you will start looking at the service provider's abilities before asking him what it is going to cost you. I think that is what is the dream of every logistician over here. Ask me what I have done. Ask me what are my capabilities. Ask me what is my history. What is the type of work I've done, and don't ask me what I'm going to charge you. Of course, that's a very important question, but it should come at number 3 or number 4 and not at number 1, which is the sad portion at this point in time. I'd like to go back to Mr. Bhatnagar. I just wanted to know that do you all use technology for predictive analysis, and what is the type of things you do over there?
So we do a lot of scenario planning, and I think that goes back to one of the questions which came from the audience as well. We ask ourselves what happens if, right? And especially for items which are and so you look at it both domestically and internationally. The benefit, in a way, if you look at it in international trade, is that you have more lead time. So if something goes wrong, you have 4 weeks to 6 weeks to respond to it. And the problem or the benefit with domestic inventory or with domestic manufacturers is that the likelihood of things going wrong in the larger context are fewer. So this is the pluses and the minus. But either way, you need to do scenario planning. So what we do is that we build scenarios, and we would say, what are the types of risks? Like we talked about the risk missiles in the Red Sea. We talked about some of the other trade barriers. Like for example, right now there's a live case where we would have India India said the drums imported must have a BIS certification, right? And I think this ties in with the other question also about collaboration. So if there is a change in regulation and it can be communicated in advance, of course it can be addressed. But if it is communicated at the time of arrival at the port, then you're stuck. So we've run a scenario analysis on this. What happens if packaging gets delayed by a month? In this case, packaging didn't get delayed. It's here, but it's late, right? So regardless of the phenomena by which it's late, but it is late. And now we have a scenario in place which says, what happens if it's 30 days late? And we already accounted for it. We built a scenario for it. This is how we manage it. There's a cost to it, right? Then that's really where a decision can be taken. Do I want to absorb this cost or I don't want to absorb this cost? Is this a risk which I'm willing to let go, or it's a risk I want to mitigate? Right? So this is really the way we would do that. In supply chain planning, we would go beyond this. We would look at also production downtimes in the plant and the probability for the same, because you would have 3, 4, 5 years of data on dedicated plants where the plant has been running in a certain way, and you can predict downtimes. Unplanned downtimes can also be predicted. Statistically speaking, what is the likelihood of a downtime? What is the probability of an extended downtime? So you build that into your production schedule. So you would tend to, if things go wrong, you would tend to be on time. If things go okay, you would tend to be up ahead of schedule by 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, depending on how much you need to do. Because that's really the only way you can make sure that you're always on time. When I was a child, Indian Railways was often late, right? And my father was at the railway station 1 hour before the scheduled time of the trains. And he used to say, train is going to be late. And he's like, if it's on time, then what? So, and then you build a schedule on that, then you will not go wrong. Of course, we don't have that kind of cushion available to us in industry today. But that's the mindset which you need to follow if you want to make sure you're on time.
Thank you. I have still another 5 minutes if anyone wants to ask a question, or I will take the question to Mr. Katgara. Oh yeah, we have a lady over there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Captain Jasmeet Chauhan. I am a retired defense officer. And my question to you, sir, Dr. Sanjeevv Khanna. I was listening to whole conversation. It was really a very good conversation, very interesting one. Everybody is talking about, geopolitical risks and how to overcome them. Sir, my question to you is, okay. So presently, I'm working with Indus Towers, and it is country's very big telecom sector company, and we are dealing with passive infra. I am looking after the logistics for Delhi NCR. Now, Delhi NCR being different geographies inside Delhi, so our lead time is very less, and we really have to work hard to keep this uptime of 99.999%. So we are working 24/7, all our logistics, trucks, and everything. Though Delhi has a very short working window of only 5 hours, in which we have to, the material has to reach the endpoint. So my question to you is, we are talking about all non-perishable things, right? So during COVID, I just want to understand, how did Patanjali manage the supply disruption because of the perishable material and material perishability and the price hike also, sir? If you can throw some light on this, I really want to understand this.
Dr. Khanna, before you take the question, I'd like to request everyone in this room, in your own small manner, please start working on impressing the state governments and the central governments for 2 things. One is to declare logistics as an industry. Out of 36, only 11 have declared us as an industry. And it was only those states which had declared logistics as an essential service who had a downtime of only 1 or 2 days during the pandemic. It took some of the states 7 days, 10 days to declare logistics as an essential industry. So while we'll of course listen to whatever Dr. Khanna has to say, in your own small manner, I think we all must start working to impress upon every state government in the country to declare logistics as an industry and to declare logistics as an essential service. Sir.
So first of all, I do strongly endorse what you said, that every state, every UT, we have to support this cause, that the logistic industry status has to be given everywhere, and without it, we are missing on lot many things. So that's just the endorsement part. But as far as your question is concerned, during COVID time, as far as our deliveries are concerned, and if I specifically talk in reference to the northern region or Delhi NCR, so as I said, basically across the country, there had not been any disruption in production or in deliveries. Rather, actually, our business had grown during that period because essential commodities are needed, that's for sure. And there is no way that everyone would have been able to handle the way we handle. So fortunately, we were there to cater to the requirement of the end customer, and government had supported in terms of the deliveries of the last mile, the first mile as well as the last mile. More importantly here, I would like to take another example, not of Patanjali, but my previous assignment with BigBasket.com, where in 2 hours in Delhi NCR, I had set up the Big Basket operations. And in 2 hours, we had to make the deliveries, and there were different time slots. Basically, as long as we work in close coordination with the government agencies and we follow the basic norms as expected. For example, we were following, at that point of time, I'm talking about 10 years back, we had all the EVs for our last mile distribution. So nowhere we were getting stopped. We were having smaller vehicles like Eco, etc., and which were permitted by the government to deliver for the last mile. As long as we follow those basic norms, I don't see really any big challenge. In the interstate, the challenges come more disturbingly as compared to the within the state. So within Delhi NCR, the most complex supply chain that I had handled was with BigBasket.com, and even there, we hardly had 1% failure rate. 99% efficiencies were there in terms of on time, in full, error-free orders. So that's my answer to that, if that satisfies.
That's very commendable. And with this, I'd like your permission to end the session because there's another session coming up immediately after us. Could I request each of you to join me in giving a big round of applause to my panelists? And thank you to each of you. Yeah, Mohit, Ayushi and all, can you please take over? Thank you.
That was such an insightful session. We couldn't have had a better start to the IICS Conference 2024. Thank you to our panelists and the moderator, Mr. Samir Shah, for the insightful discussions.